Hey there, my name is Kelly Dell with OffTheBeatedPathBeadStore.com. Thanks for joining me for week 9 of our Peyote Stitch series. Now, up until this point, we have gone over all the different type flat peyotes. And in today's video, we're going to make these earrings, and you are going to see what happens when you start out and you use a specific size and you graduate to more sizes. So what happens is you get this really cool fan look, and it's a lot of fun. The really great thing about these earrings is that you don't have to do these as a triple fan. You can do them as a single, a double, or all three, just like this. Now, the first thing you'll want to do is go to OffTheBeatedPathBeadStore.com and grab the free pattern for the project. So you go to OffTheBeatedPathBeadStore.com, go under step-by-step tutorials, and then there is a free section, and you will see this pattern there available. This will walk you through the steps that I'm going to show you here in the video. And it's just nice to have a physical copy or a copy on your computer that you can look at as you make these earrings. It just makes life a little bit simpler. So we're going to need quite a few different size beads. So let's take a look at the different beads that you're going to need to do this project. So the first thing you want to do is you want to lay your colors out. Now I'm using the No More Oops bead trays that we sell on the website, and this just makes it really easy and helpful because it already has our A, B, C, D, E, F, G at the top, but you want to separate them into their numbers. So A is going to be a 15, B is going to be a 15, C is your 11-0 Delica, D is an 11-0 seed bead, E is an 8-0, F is an 8-0, and G is a 6-0. So we are putting them in order as we are going to put them on the earring itself. So we're going to start out with this top tier, or what I call tier 1 in the pattern. It's going to be this top piece here. The great thing about these, and you'll see as we go along, if you don't like a long earring, you can always do just a single tier or 2 tiers or 3 tiers like I have pictured. It is completely up to you. I'm going to be using my 1G thread today. You can use whatever kind of thread you want, but when you make this, you have to use a little bit of a softer tension, especially if you are a very tight beater. Essentially down here on the bottom, that is where you need a little bit of softer tension. So 1G works great. If I try to use a fire line, everything's going to turn out tight and wavy, and I'm not going to be happy with it. So to start tier 1, or the top tier, we're going to be starting here and working our way down. Then we will come back up and do this top part. Now what you'll need to do is, this is using odd count peyote. So you'll need to decide which version of odd count you want to do for the project. Me, I'm going to do that traveling tail method, but if you're unsure of which method you want to go to, you can go back on YouTube and watch my odd count peyote video in this series, and I'm going to link it below in that video description box. So on the pattern itself, we are going to start here, tier 1, top layer. Thread on a needle with 1.5 yards of your favorite beading thread. Thread on 11 A beads and work a row of OCP is odd count peyote using your A beads. This counts as rows 1 and 2. So this is what we're going to do. So I'm going to slide this over a little bit, and I'm going to start picking up 11 A's. Now I'm going to go ahead and double count and make sure I have 11. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. And I do. Now I did not put a stop bead on this piece because I'm going to do that traveling tail method. So if you are going to do a different method, you will want to make sure that you leave yourself enough tail thread that you can go back and add the top of the earring So it's completely up to you, however you want to do it. But now I'm going to be working again in odd count peyote. So I'm zooming in a little bit here. So as I work back, it's just normal peyote. So I pick up a 15, I skip the very last bead, and then I go through the next one. Pick up a bead, skip a bead, and go through the next one. This row is the hardest one to get started because you are using little tiny 15s to start your peyote stitch. So once you get here to the end, this is where you have to make that decision about the type of odd count turn that you're going to do. Like I said, I'm going to do the traveling tail method. So this means that I pick up my bead, I'm going to hold the tail tightly in my hand, and I'm going to take the needle, go under that tail thread, pull it through, making sure that this bead does not go under that thread. And then I'm going to pass back through the bead again. So that is rows 1 and 2 of the pattern. Row 3 says we are going to peyote B beads. So I'm going to go to that second color of my 15s, and I'm just going to peyote straight across with those B beads. Now, I am not pulling this super tight. I'm just pulling this enough so that it pops those beads into place where we need them to be. Step number 3, which is row 4, says to peyote B beads. So I'm going to work back and I'm going to peyote those B beads again. Now I know in the materials list you saw earlier, I was sure to put on there, that all your beads need to be the same brand. And that's really important. All the beads that I'm using here are Miyuki Seed Beads. If you use a different brand bead as far as, you're working and say you put your D instead of being, say I'm using all Miyuki, instead of being a Miyuki, I used a Toho. Well, then that will affect how this piece is going to look. So you really want all your beads to be that same brand. Row 5 says Peyote Seed Beads. So now I'm going to my Delicas. Now, in this one that I'm using, I'm actually using the Delicas. This is DB 1874. They kind of have that cut or satin finish, as they're called. So these actually, when I put them in there, they take up just a smidge bit more room, which in the long run will kind of wave it out a little bit, which is fine. But when I used regular Delicas that don't have this satin finish or this cut finish, it worked out much better. But I'm committed. I like the color. I'm going with it. So that is row 5. So that takes you to the next page of the pattern, which is going to be number 5. Row 6 says Peyote C beads. So now I'm going to work back and I'm going to just peyote with these C beads, which are my 11 Delicas. And the colors that I've used on both samples are listed in the pattern on the last pages. And when you do this row, when you put them in, you're going to feel it pop into place almost. It's going to feel like there's not enough room, but there is. I promise you, it all works out. But especially when you get to the third tier, it's really going to feel like there's not enough room there. So just know that the process works. And again, I'm not pulling tight. I'm just pulling enough to pop the beads into place. So row 7 and row 8 are D beads. So I hope that you're kind of seeing now that each row, we're basically going to do 2 rows, 1 row down, 1 row back of the same color. So I've done A, B, C. So now this is D, which is going to be a regular round 11-0. So that is 7, and now 8 is working back down in this direction. So you can see now how it's really starting to fan out, and that's the look we're going for. So now we're bumping up to E beads. So the E beads in steps row 9 and row 10 are going to pop in between these 11s. And when you do this first row, this row 9, when you put them in there, sometimes it's going to feel and it's going to look like these beads are a little wonky. And that's okay because they will be corrected in the next row that we do. So if they're not sitting 100% perfect, like these aren't right here, it's okay because they will be fixed. So that's row 9. And so now we're on row 10, which I'm just going to work back this way. And as I go through, those beads will fix themselves. Rows 11 and 12, we're going to be using F. That's another size 8. So I'm just going to work down and add those. And when you're picking your colors for the projects, don't worry. Just start stitching beads together. Everybody always says, oh, well, you know, how do you choose your colors? Your colors look so good. And one day I will do sort of like a color theory type thing for you guys. I mean, honestly, just pick colors that you love and start stitching them together. And if you love them, fantastic. If not, decide which one you don't like and just choose a different one of those. So play, have fun with this. It is going to be a lot of fun. So now rows 13 and 14 are going to be the G beads. Now these are our size 6 seed beads, and you see they're rather large. So you've got a couple of options here. You can keep going with your G beads, which I'm going to do because I love how they look. Or you could even stop here and make a shorter earring. Or you could put, say, like some drops here or some little picots or whatever you want to do. But this is just showing us what happens when we take small beads and we peyote them just in our even or our odd count, whatever we want to do, and we get into bigger beads. So you see how it really fans out and makes it look completely different than our normal peyote. So now I'm going to do 2 rows here with my G beads. And on your G's, you really want to make sure that you kind of what they call coil them, which is you want to make sure that you're using beads that are mainly all that same size. Try not to find any that are, or throw out any that look a little bit bigger or maybe a little bit smaller, because you really want those to be even and all that same. So once I do that last bead here on the end, I'm actually going to take and I'm going to go through the G beads here along the bottom to kind of help reinforce them a little bit, because they are bigger and a little bit heavier. So I'm going to go through them again, and then I'm going to take my working thread that's coming out here on the end, and I'm going to kind of zigzag up to come out of this top. Now you'll want to make sure when you're picking your thread, you'll notice I kind of used like a brown or like a drab olive color, because it blends in really well with the beads that I'm using. If I was using, say, a black thread, you would really see the thread there along the edge. So I always like to pick a color that's going to blend pretty good. All right, so when I come out of that top A bead, I'm going to be coming out towards the center. It does not matter if I come this way or this way. It's going to work out the same way either way. So now what I want to do is I'm going to thread a needle onto this tail thread, and then I want to get rid of that tail thread as well. So when I do this one, I'm going to use it again to just reinforce the bottom of the earring, which is going to be those G beads. So I'm going to run those through again. And then I'll continue to work it in to get rid of this short tail thread, and I will cut this short tail thread off. So once you have that tail thread taken care of, then we're ready to work some decrease rows. Now, if you're following along on the pattern, the decrease rows are going to start on step 15 of our pattern. And it says peyote 1 row with A beads. So I'm just going to work across, and I'm going to peyote with those A beads. So when I get here to the end, and I go through that last bead there on the end, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over on the side, and you'll notice that we have what I call thread bridges. They're little bridges of threads that connect the beads as they go down. So I'm going to take the needle, and I'm going to pass under the thread bridge between the 2 end beads there. I'm going to pull that through, and then I'm going to pass back through the bead I was just coming out of and the last bead that I added. So that is a super quick turnaround, so that now I can do another decrease row. So I'm going to be using my A's again, and I'm going to just work across doing the peyote. And I will go through the last bead of the row there. And again, when I come out of this last bead, I'm coming out right here between these two beads. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to pass under the thread that connects those two beads together. So the two rows there, I'm going to pull that thread all the way through. And then I'm going to pass back through the two beads, the one I was coming out of and the last one that I added. So again, I hold that in place. Now that is another quick turnaround so that I can do another row of beads with my A's. So on that row, we're only adding 3 beads. Again, you can see right there where I'm coming out between those beads. I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to pass it under the thread between those two beads there. Pull that all the way through. And then I will pass through the bead I was just coming out of. And then that last bead that I added. So I've done the turnaround. I'm going to thread on 2 beads because this is another decrease row. And again, where I'm coming out, I'm going to pass under the thread that connects those 2 beads together. And then I'm going to pass through the bead I was just coming out of and the last bead that I added, so that now, again, I've done that turnaround and I'm ready for another decrease. Now, in all of my samples, I'm going to put in an A bead here. You have enough room that you could probably put a C or a D bead in this space and it will look fine as well. But I'm just going to continue to use my A and I'm going to work that last decrease stitch so that it makes the point. And just like I've done the previous rows, I'm going to go under the thread between those 2 beads and then turn around so that, again, I'm in position to do what's next. So what's next finishes up step 24 and takes us to step 25, which is to thread on 8 A beads. And once you have those 8 beads, you are going to pass back through the same bead again to make a circle. And then you are going to go through this a couple of times to reinforce and then get rid of this thread. So if you're someone who likes really petite earrings, this would make a really cute earring just in itself. So if you wanted to stop here, you definitely could. But I'm going to go ahead and finish this one and show you the start of the next one. Now that you have tier 1 finished, then we go on to tier 2. Now, if you look at your pattern on page 6, you will see here, tier 2 is going to be your middle layer. It's going to be worked exactly like the first layer. The only difference is, whereas tier 1, we started out with 11 of our A, tier 2, we are starting out with 15 A beads. So it's going to be worked the exact same way. It's just you will be adding more beads per row. Now, the 2 rows you need to pay attention to are going to be this Peyote 1C row. So this is going to be the second row C. Those are going to feel tighter. And then down here on step 34, where you're going to peyote an E row, again, it's going to feel wavy, but it's going to correct itself. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to work on tier 2 so that I can show you how to connect tier 2 and tier 1 together. Tier 2 is going to look like this when it's complete. I've already gotten rid of the short tail thread, and you'll notice on this one, when I stitched to the top, I made sure that my thread was coming out in this direction. But now I did exactly like I did on this first one. When I come down to the bottom, I stitched through that again before I came up to the top. Now we're going to connect the two together. So if you look at tier 1 and you look at your E beads, which is going to be this row right here, this row of E beads, we mainly are going to work the connection here and here. So we're mainly going to be using these 2 end beads on each side. So I'm going to take the new piece and I'm going to lay it onto tier 1, just like this. I'm going to kind of center it there between those beads. And so now that I know exactly where it's going to go, I can take the thread and I can come on this side and I'm going to pass through those 2 E beads there on the end. And then that will pull that up to where it needs to be. So I'm going to go ahead and pass back through the beads to come out of the E beads again, and then out of that very end A that I was originally coming out of. Be careful right here because it's easy to get your thread caught when you're doing this part. You want to pull it and make sure everything pulls up tight. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass through in an up and down motion through the A beads that are here along this top curve of tier 2. And I'm just going to continue going through the lower and then the upper A as I work across. And again, be careful because it will get caught on those end beads. So I'm going to continue to work until I'm coming out of this A here on the other end. Once you come out of that end A bead there, then we're going to take and we're going to pass the needle to these 2 E beads here on the end, so that now tier 2 is connected to tier 1. And then what I'll do is I will make sure that I go through and I reinforce this. So I'm going to pass down through the beads to get back to that E again. And then I'm going to pass through the A there on the end. And then I'm just going to zigzag through the beads to get rid of this thread. Once you have that thread finished off and completed, then tiers 1 and 2 are connected. And again, you can leave the earring as tier 1 and 2. You don't have to go on to tier 3. But if you want to do tier 3 is going to be done exactly like these two. The pattern is, or the instructions for that are going to be on page 7. The only difference is this time we are going to be adding 19 A beads in that first row. Now, there are a couple of places where I'm going to come in at step 52 and 57 and kind of give you some pointers there as you do those rows. But go ahead and start your third tier if that's what you want to do. When you are doing tier 3 and you put on the E beads, it is going to be very wavy, and that's okay, because what's going to happen is when we put on the F beads, then that is really going to help straighten it up. Now, if it's super wavy and you're really worried, you can take and kind of grab a hold and pull it out like this from the center, and that will help loosen up a little bit, but sometimes it makes it worse. So just watch when you do that. But you'll just continue then with your F beads, and you'll see what happens is it starts to pull them up a little bit, and that's what fixes that. So if you do that row with the E's and you're really worried, then just keep going with the F's, because I promise you, see how it's doing it there? It will really fix that, and you won't have to worry about that. When you add your last row of G's, it can get really wonky on this third tier. So you have a couple of options. Option one is to take and grab here in the middle and then just kind of fan it out like this, and this will help to really loosen it up a little bit and make it look better. The second thing is to just take your needle, and this is why we go through and we reinforce, because this is really helpful in straightening those beads up as you work. So you can take and you can go through them again and it will really help them to pop better into place and not be so wavy. So you can see what I've done here in reinforcement and what's not been reinforced yet. So it really does help to reinforce those end beads and go through them again to help you out. Okay, so it's still just a little wavy. So I'm going to take and do it like that. And that is much, much better now. You can see it kind of cups this right here up top, and that's completely fine, because what we're going to do is we are going to attach this to those E beads again. So when we go to tier 2 and we look, here's an E bead and here's an E bead. These are going to attach right to those E beads so that we can have that third tier attached and completed. So once you have the 3 tiers connected, then you can go ahead and attach your ear wire to that top loop and then make a second one so that you will have your pair of Peyote Fan Earrings. So they're a lot of fun to make. You've got color choices that are endless. I will tell you, just from the experience of making these, that I really enjoyed using these matte beads here on the edges rather than shiny beads, because the matte beads just kind of hold together really well. The shiny beads seem to make the base bottom just a smidge more wavy, and that's fine. It's totally cool. I still love them. But if you are someone who just absolutely wants these 100% flat, because I mean, now the black ones are there. I mean, they are nice and super flat. And this one is as well, except for this bottom one right here. It's just a little bit wavy. So if you want it completely flat and stiff, which I really don't recommend, you can actually use the diamond glaze. Mix it with just a little bit of water, a 50-50 mix, and then you can dip this in your diamond glaze and it will stiffen. So you have to leave it out to dry and then it will stiffen it up a little bit for you. But I absolutely love how these look and how you can do a 1 tier, a 2 tier, or a 3 tier. So guys, I hope you enjoyed learning how to use different size seed beads to make a graduated effect earring. It's a lot of fun and I cannot wait to see what you do with your pieces. So if you have not done it, make sure to go to the website offthebeadedpathbeadstore.com and get that free pattern that goes along with today's tutorial. You guys have a great one and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.